organizing work. To encounter a sociologist, you have to, you can go to a site of learning and you'll find one. You go to a school or a university, whereas to find an anarchist, it's a lot tougher. You have to, you have to go to you have to figure out first what an info shop is and then go find one, right? Or you have to go to a anarcho-syndicalist union hall, again, if there is one, right? So you stumble upon them, whereas sociologists, they're in the phone book, I suppose. If you've got the right kind of phone book. The general appraisal, I think, that the population has of anarchism is usually one of fear. And if it's not one of fear, it's usually one that attempts to discredit. Whereas I think the general population's appraisal of sociology is often one of confusion. First, for those of you who are in sociology, you probably know this. How many times have you said, I'm taking a sociology class, and they kind of get it confused with one of any number of different terms that kind of sound like sociology, like, socialism, social work, psychology. And you're like, no, it's sociology. And sometimes, I've had these conversations where I don't think people really understood what it was. But the rest of the general appraisal that people would have is one of invisibility about sociologists, that they're not really in the public eye. They don't get quoted in the media as much. You don't really, people don't raise it in conversation. I'm a sociologist, well, nice, good for you. What does that mean you do, And then lastly, I think if we wanted to contrast anarchism and sociology, we would think about their views of how things change. For anarchists, change, at least of a radical variety, is something that you pursue, that you seek out. Whereas for sociologists, it's something that you sort of study. You think about it and you wonder why it happens. Fourth, the kind of practical utility that an anarchist sociology would have. And maybe I can just spend a minute reflecting on the work of C. Wright Mills, who maybe some sociologists know. He wrote a number of really important, interesting books, including The Power Elite and a few other books. And one that he wrote right before he died was called The Sociological Imagination, which kind of in a nutshell means that people have to find a way of connecting the personal troubles they experience in their everyday lives and connecting that experience to social issues that are happening in the broader society. So it's a way of kind of connecting individuals to society. Mills, despite what I think he's been labeled in the past as, he wasn't a Marxist and really wasn't a conflict sociologist in any kind of historically accurate way. He often identified as a wobbly. And once when he was asked, about what he thought of people who confused his work with liberalism or Marxism, he said, what these jokers, all of them, don't realize is that deep down and systematic, I'm a goddamn anarchist. And which is interesting coming from someone from Columbia University, but then again he drove a motorcycle to work regular, so maybe there was sort of that rebel in him, I guess. But what we wanted to do was to find a way of creating a kind of a practical tool like the sociological imagination, something you could use. So maybe, even though I'm sure people have used the term before, of an anarchist imagination, maybe that might mean realistically seeing oneself embedded within structures of domination, about where you might be personally, individually, how authority affects you, and then first being able to critique where you are, and secondly, knowing how to liberate yourself from those structures of domination. So kind of as a practical utility, kind of in the same way that the sociological imagination is what he was using as a way of empowering people to think more sociologically. Fifth, lastly, developing a more anarchistic sociology. So maybe one way of reconceptualizing the discipline would to think about what a sociology of freedom might mean, or what a sociology of anti-authoritarianism might mean, or a sociology of direct action, or a sociology of mutual aid, or a sociology of decentralization. On one hand, maybe to seek out and study those things that are essentially values and to find their kind of real-world manifestations and to think about them sociologically. But also maybe on the other hand, secondly, to think about how as a scholarly discipline we could actually incorporate those values too. So how would a sociologist act in line with the value of freedom or of anti-authoritarianism? What it would mean to people who study those things or act as sociologists, what would those values sort of mean for us? And in our paper, we talk a little bit more in depth about what each of those values might mean in terms of what we would study, but also how we would act. So that being said, hopefully people in the room, whether you've studied sociology or not, have ideas or questions. We really would like to get some feedback and ideas about this before we go to press, but just very excited that there's people who are interested in anarchism and sociology and psychology. So, thanks.